Howdy ho there, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. My name is Justin, and this is this is the first time I'm coming to you. Here we are, version 32 of Breaking Change, titled "The Large Lemon Model." Find out what that means in a moment. First time I'm coming to you, and I can officially call this production content marketing because I have a product to discuss. So stay tuned if you haven't been following my other various feeds and whatnot. Also, this is the second video first. Version 31 was published in full in 4K in YouTube. Turned out fine. I don't know who watches a 3-hour video on YouTube. Maybe just some number. It was a small number, I would hope. I didn't check, but if you were watching on the podcast, you'll see that it's Purple Shirt Day at the Searles household, and behind me are 3 gigantic, bass traps that are the same color purple. So that's not your eyes deceiving you. If you're listening to the audio production, it has the added benefit of you don't have to look at me. So, and that can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever all fine podcasts are sold. A lot going on, less in life and more in news. So I think today will be a brisk walk. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to you today. It's been a little while. It feels like every couple of weeks I start to miss you. And I think, man, I should hang out with my friend, the Breaking Change listener. Many of you have reached out in the last couple of weeks. I know that because I just randomly... So when you email the show, podcast@searles.co. And please do. I encourage you. Apparently, that is hosted by iCloud Mail. iCloud Mail is the mail provider that I have foolishly, and mostly because it's free, assigned as the custom domain for my iCloud account, for searles.co. And so I've associated that. I'm not paying $5 a month for Google. I'm paying $0 a month for my existing iCloud Plus subscription because I'm an Apple freakazoid. And so that means that while the email works mostly fine, I'm at the mercy of Apple's subpar junk mail filtering algorithm. And I train it as best as I can, but I don't go in poking around, fishing out garbage out of the junk mail very often. And just last night, I just happened to be in the web interface, and it prominently told me I had a whole lot of stuff in junk. And I was clicking through, and I was like, "Oh, look at that! There's a lot of actual, real humans trying to contact the mailbag for this show." And it only keeps 30 days, but I was able to pluck a few out. So if you've been writing into the show and you're like, "Man, he just never replies. What an asshole!" There's a real good chance that Tim Cook and Craig Federighi intercepted that email because it was too real. They didn't want the truth to get out. They were just trying to keep us from each other. So sorry about that. I will try to. I set up a recurring reminder to at least every 4 weeks go and scan the junk mail for any mailbag items that I might have missed. So whoops. Got back from Vegas a few days ago, still recovering. Test Double, the company I co-founded in 2011. It's a software services company. We hire fantastic programmers and now also product developers, product managers, product consultants. We acquired a firm called Pathfinder that does product consulting, and I know how to talk about programming stuff, and I don't necessarily. I know how to I believe that I have really good taste and I can contribute to the design of products pretty well. But I don't know the lingo, so here I am not even knowing how to describe what they do, but they do it real well, I'm told. Their annual retreat was in Vegas, and we also timed it to coincide with the Q4 2024 board meeting. So that means that me and the rest of the board were there for the final day of the retreat, and we did a little kind of panel discussion with the crew, answer kind of hot seat questions about everyone's favorite board and finance and policy topics about the company. and about what the hell a board does. And then the second day, full day that I was there, we were in, you know, full day board meeting stuff. On top of that, you're in Vegas just for 2 nights. You have a couple dinners. You just inhale some of the fumes outside on the strip because it's disgusting, and then the fumes inside in the hotel because it's disgusting. And then you go and you retreat to your room, and it's like a however old the Treasure Island Hotel is room, and the ventilation is bad, and that's separately not. It's not my what are they called? I want to say aioli, but that's the mayonnaise one. The things in your lungs that receive oxygen, they weren't getting enough oxygen. Maybe my brain wasn't getting enough oxygen. Anyway, back from Vegas. I don't love Vegas. For a guy who lives in America's other theme park in Orlando, the thing about Orlando that I like is that it's clean. And I don't mean like no hookers clean. I mean the presence of dirt and grime and filth is low. Air quality is great here. We have an abundance of fresh water. Everything's shiny and slick and new in theme park Orlando. Can't vouch for downtown or the east side. And you go to Vegas and you immediately feel disgusting. And then you stay there, and the time that you're there, you feel pretty disgusting. And then you come home, and it feels like you just need 15 baths. It made me feel like I need to reread The Sun Also Rises, which is a book mostly about a man who can't get clean enough, and he's just taken a lot of baths, if I recall. And then read it from the bath. That's how dirty I felt. So I'm still recovering. I don't know how many days ago it was. It's all a blur. The only nonsense I get up to when I go to Vegas, and this is just a habit that actually my co-founder Todd introduced me to when I was a young buck. We did our first retreat there as a team, I think in 2013, so over 10 years ago. And he sat me down at the video poker table at Caesars. So at Caesars Palace, there's a video poker. If you've been to Vegas, maybe this is a shared experience you and I have had. You go to Caesars Palace, there's the front desk. Just to the right, there is a bar and table of video poker. And nowadays, when you play video poker at any of the major strip hotels, they print out little vouchers for drink coupons. But back then, you would just show up. Back then, in the olden days of 10 years ago, you would just show up, and they would see that you're gambling. You'd put $20 into the video poker, and then you'd just make the minimum bet, like 25 cents per hand. And if you just occupied the space for a while, they'd keep plying you with free drinks. And then you'd cash out after an hour with your 17 remaining dollars or whatever. And for $3 and no tips because I was a piece of shit, you'd get, I'd slam a couple of White Russians. I'd have, maybe a whiskey sour, hard to fuck up drinks like, rum and Coke or something. And then I'd be pretty toasted. Anyway, so Todd introduced me to that wild world, because as long as you know the rules of poker, you can get a lot of free drinks. And he really did the thing. He did the thing that addicts people to gambling at me, which is he very rudely sat down, put $20 in, and on his third hand got a royal flush, which is the best hand in video poker, and most kinds of poker. That is to say, you get a 10, jack, queen, king, ace, all in the same suit. Very low probability. Yeah, so he draws a royal flush, just draws it right off the first flop of cards. And the payout was like $2,500 because he was like a max bet guy or some outrageous amount of money like that. And so he gets this little voucher and has to go to the cashier, and they made him do a 1099-G for the taxes, because over a certain threshold you got to file for taxes. And I was looking at that, and I was like halfway through one White Russian as he was showing me the ropes, and I was like, damn, I could get used to this. As I proceeded to lose like $80 over the next several days, getting drunk off my ass. So that's my one gambling trick. It's less effective now because all the computers will track what you spend, and they'll be appropriately stingy with those drink coupons if you're not actually making the house enough money. The only other thing that really, I guess worth sharing about my life and times and about that particular trip, other than I will mention that we had rough landings going and coming. And if you've been watching the news, which I've been mostly avoiding, people on the ship, people on the plane were primed to be nervous about the landings. We were coming into Vegas, and planes going down, going down. We don't hear the landing gear engage, or at least I didn't. I didn't notice it, and the people next to me didn't notice it. And then right as you're looking out the window, and I don't know if you do this, but when I'm looking out the window and I can see that the horizon's getting real close, it feels like we're just about to touch down. I kind of just like loosen my body and prepare for a collision. I was like, it's like drunks only survive car crashes because they're all loosey-goosey. So it's just like, I'm like, all right, let go and release just in case we crash so that my bones don't all immediately shatter. That's my airplane landing routine. And I did that, and then as I'm loosening up, the plane just zips up at an outrageously high angle. And then 10 minutes elapse, and now we're turning to each other. Did the landing gear not engage properly because we didn't hear it? What was going on? Why didn't we land? Why was that landing scrubbed at the last second? We were looking around. Doesn't seem like high winds, but you're in a pressurized cabin. You don't know. And so everyone's brain immediately went to, oh God, I hope that's not mechanical. I hope this isn't going to be one of those, like, I really get to know you kind of experiences. Because the guy next to me, he's fine, but I wouldn't want to spend 3 more hours with him. And turned out, 15 minutes, 10 minutes later, felt like a long time, the flight attendant calls, hey, word from the flight deck was there was like an unauthorized plane in the runway. Presumably, some ATC guy who's scared for his job because of Doge is stressed out and making mistakes. And it seems to be a thing going on. So we did land, and that was great. Then on the way home, landing again, because I've noticed that almost every plane I get in that takes off also has to land, which sucks. It's one big reason I don't want to fly more than I have to. We land successfully. The wheels touch down. And then normally when a plane hits the ground, it decelerates and braking occurs and maybe revert. I want to think in like Star Trek terms, like engage reverse thrusters. I have no fucking idea. I just know that like the wheels touch down and then the plane starts moving more slowly. Well, it didn't. It just touched down and then it's just like burning rubber and we're just going cruising. And I'm like, man, I hope this is a long fucking runway here in Orlando because this is taking him a minute. I'm imagining that big berm at the end of the runway, before it just flows straight into the highway. So I made my body extra loose just in case. I was like, oh shoot, I'm flying Southwest. I didn't have any drink coupons. I wasn't prepared for this. But we survived. Eventually the captain decided, you know what? I'm going to give these folks a break. And he applied some pressure to whatever that pedal is or knob or whatever the fuck. So I survived. Counter to the conspiracy of government bureaucrats in the Trump administration trying to kill me in a plane. Not this time, Satan. Has anything else happened in life? Oh, this is fascinating. I came home to all the normal chores, and one of them was the pool was full of just like crap on the skimmer again, or like, detritus, pollen and bugs and stuff skimming the surface because the water level had become too high. So it was higher than the skimmer. So the skimmer stops. This is great video content, by the way, just based on the hand gestures alone. If you happen to catch the YouTube, hello. So the skimmer stops about 1.5 inches below the lip of the tile, right? So like the pool can be more full than the top of the skimmer. And the skimmer is still sucking in water because water flows with fluid dynamics. But the problem is the way the skimmer works is like if the water line is above the top of the skimmer's little plastic rim, it's like a little rectangle, then it's not actually skimming the shit on top of the pool. And so it's incumbent on your pool guy, who I pay extra, to drain the pool so that the skimmer can actually skim. to do that. And apparently he hadn't. So I had to go out, drain the pool, and skim it. And then I noticed there was another problem with the pump. And then I noticed another thing and realized there's a whole bunch of pollen along the tile. And so before I know it, I'm kind of going through the whole routine and getting the vacuum out and cleaning up the pool and whatnot. And incidentally, one of the things I did was just to test the heater and the hot tub area in the back. I realize these are approaching first world problems, perhaps. I got it all working, felt good about it. The hot tub seemed to work, turned it off. I turned it off with a shortcut that I set that controls the system via a Homebridge accessory to Pentair, which is the company that does the pool shit. And the shortcut does a few things. It turns off any like the extra air blowers to kind of add more bubbles. It changes the pump situation from spa hot tub mode to pool mode, and it turns off the heater. Well, it turned out like I learned 2 days later last night when Becky and I were near the pool, and I was like, wow, it's really warm out. It's been pretty sunny, but like, damn, that's impressively warm water. And then about an hour after that, I thought, that's suspiciously warm water. And I looked, and it's like, sure enough, the pump successfully, changed over. So it was no longer a closed loop of just the hot tub. So now it's just heating the entire however many thousands of gallons of water the whole pool is. But the heater didn't disengage, and that was still at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, the pool was real hot, and I can't wait to get my natural gas bill. So it's that's the kind of adventures that I get up to these days, and I'm not super mad about it. Yeah, and that's my whole life. That's it right there. So let's follow up on some other shit. Was out with some friends for drinks, and I don't know how this wound up in follow up. I guess I'm following up on a memory I have from 10 years ago. We're out at a friend's house, and we're chatting about modern day doctor's appointments and the perils of having a Gen Z doctor who was an iPad kid and doesn't know how to make eye contact and maintain it with another human. And so you're telling them about all of your, hey, I got this thing over here. I got this lesion in my stomach. And they're just staring at their little, ThinkPad or tablet or whatever their electronic medical record device is. And they're typing is, okay, can you just tell me where it is? I'm like, I'm right here. You could just look here, touch it, touch my lesion. But they don't want to do that anymore because they're just staring at their toy. And I get it because we're all slaves to whatever software mediates our jobs now. But I was complaining about this phenomenon because when after the Affordable Care Act rolls out, there's certain incentives for everything from your PCP to hospitals to go full electronic medical records. My brother, who was with us, he mentioned that actually newer facilities, he was just at the doctor, and his doctor actually extended the consult time with patients from whatever it was, 20 minutes to 25 minutes or something like that, because they're using some new product, some new maybe module in Epic or something like that, or MyChart, to have a microphone that sits and listens to the whole conversation between doctor and patient. And so the doctor's not spending most of their time transcribing and typing notes, but rather and this is just like the AI that sits in your Zoom call and summarizes your notes, your meeting for later. And it just does the summary of the consult. And then it fills out a lot of the kind of requisite basic forms for the doctor so that they're only spending, a couple minutes after each session instead of 10 to fill out all the stuff and write it down. And you might, depending on how you feel about AI, that either sounds really awesome because you get to talk to your real doctor more and they're looking at you in the eyes, or really terrifying because now Sam Altman is doing it, or whatever, cut rate discount backroom LLM that the major enterprise grade healthcare software companies are settling for. Whatever IBM Watson, Frankenstein has been sitting in some closet for 15 years and only to be resold and some Byzantine procurement process to a major, like Cerner or Epic kind of company. But I don't know. If it works, that's great. That's kind of the theory of the case with all of this. If it works, it's great. And sometimes it doesn't work because computers are no longer deterministic. Whoops, sorry. Uh, More follow up. I've been talking about, I've been teasing you all more than anyone that I am building a single app to manage the cross posting of all of my social media shit. So if you follow me at all, if you didn't just slip ass backwards into this podcast feed, but you see my website, you see any of my social feeds or anything, you will probably have noticed that I have a website. It has posts. Almost all the types of posts just hit the main feed. And you can go to the website and you can scroll through the feed. But who the fuck goes to a website? And so what I do is I've got a little silly collection of different column integrations, I guess. Like some are Docker servers that run in my Synology downstairs. Some are GitHub actions. And they repost whatever is in my RSS feed from my website onto Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads. And I could add more, but the problem is even imagining adding more like LinkedIn or Facebook is that's just more single points of failure that I'm adding to the system, or I guess just points of failure. And maintaining these things is hard, and they turn off and they break for random reasons, and there's no observability, there's no error notifications. Becky was frustrated with the lack of error notifications in this sort of hobbled together system, which is why I just had to reinvent a lot of that stuff inside the context of her Better with Becky platform. So now it's got a podcast host, it's got a syndication engine, it's got the Becky Graham video and image hosting, it's got and that's all just the free stuff before you get to the paid subscription of the strength training module and the workout interface. So she's got a lot of software under her now. And I was thinking, I too would like to benefit from custom software, and so I started working on a Rails application that would basically just define a configuration layer for that feed. So you can take in an RSS or an Atom feed, and you can configure it with a custom tag that's just sort of like a JSON configuration of configuration property names and values. Do I want to syndicate this true or false? What format string do I want? Do I just want to post the title of whatever the feed entry is? Or do I want to post, maybe title dash author or whatever it is? So you can customize all that based on what shows up in your feed. And then it checks the feed very frequently, updates the feed, gets the latest version of all of your posts, and then goes through all of your accounts. So you register your accounts in this app that I built, and every time it finds a new post that is eligible to be posted on that social platform, it'll post it. That's all there is to it right now. I can imagine adding a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm working on Threads support right now after I've got Mastodon, Blue Sky, and Twitter, X. And I think I'd like to add images because Threads and Blue Sky in particular are very, straightforward APIs for enclosing media attachments like images. And I know I want to add Instagram, which is going to definitely require me to do images. I'm probably going to hold off on video because all of these services, if you try to upload a video, you either have to download the video first and then upload it, or you have to give it the URL, a publicly facing URL of the video, and then you have to keep on checking on it and waiting for the video to be fully processed by the service, which I found in the case of Becky, and Becky's app does this, can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 hours of waiting for it to deal with even an 80 megabyte video. And that's a lot of background jobs just kicking the can down the road, and a lot of things that can go wrong because while these services might be happy to convert an image file maybe from a ping to a JPEG or something to optimize its distribution over the web, they're not going to re-encode video, and so you'll just end up with way higher error rates of, turns out that the audio bitrate was 192 instead of a maximum of 128, and so this video keeps getting kicked out, and then you got to pull it down and analyze the video file and try to figure out, shoot. So I probably won't do video, but it does all the other stuff, and now that I've got a single common configuration and a data source, adding an additional marginal social account type is pretty easy. There's no user interface yet. There's no payment stuff set up yet. But if I can just make it pleasant and automated and work for me, then adding that stuff is kind of a known problem. So I've decided I'm going to share it publicly, or at least announce that I am. I reserve the right to quit at any time. And I bought a domain name, which is usually how I get the ball rolling as I think of a name. The name is Posse Party, as in we're going to get our party posse together over at Posse Party. Not confusing at all. The mascot's name is also Posse, but spelled differently. So I got that domain too. The reason for the name, why Posse matters, is it's become a meme among neckbeard internet nerds who care about websites. And I thought that's a real marketable idea, is to get behind whatever they're doing. So it's an acronym, POSSE, as in post on your own site, post own site, syndicate elsewhere. And that's what I've been doing, and that's what this thing does, and it's all automated. But it's a party. We're getting it all together. We want to get more people into the party. I want to make it really easy for anyone who has a Medium page or a Blogspot, if Blogspot still exists, or a Squarespace, to have their own website, even if it's hosted by some platform. And based on the feed of that, then have that just shunt out to the social accounts so that we don't all individually have to be bouncing between these different timelines to either post our stuff or kind of sort of like staying on top of mentions and likes and stuff like that and engagement. If you want the engagement, at least version 1 of this thing, I don't know what to tell you. Go and roll around in the mud in all these timelines and doom scroll to your heart's content. Version 2, like if this thing gets some traction and people actually use it, version 2 might look like, in addition to cross-posting your stuff, it'll look at engagement on your posts. And while I'm not concerned about the metrics, because this is not a thing for social media managers so much as individual publishers and content creators, but it would be nice if it just aggregated all of the replies and DMs that you got into one unified inbox. Or better yet, just forwarded them to you as email that you could reply via email, and then it would send a reply inside of the app to the person, right? So that that way you could stay in touch with people and just manage everything out of email, as if you had successfully convinced everyone just to email you. And while I've done a pretty good job of convincing people to email me, I've also been throwing them in the junk mail, apparently. So that's going great. So anyway, it's called Posse Party. POSSEPARTY.com. And it's not launched yet, but there's a little treatise, manifesto, summation of like what I'm doing here, and a wait list that you can sign up for. And if you add your email to the list, I will either email you or not based on how good I am at managing email, which is apparently poor. I don't know. It'll come out sometime this year. I'm trying to keep it pretty narrow in terms of what it does, because I want it to be over as fast as possible, and I don't want this to stretch out for many, many more months. But I also, I've got an absurdly high level of quality that I hold myself to, and if it's not there yet, I will probably keep on polishing that pewter until the cows come home, to mix metaphors. Another piece of follow-up. I own a Tesla, as I've talked about. We covered it significantly in version 31. We teased it in version 30. Becky and I bought a Model Y, and we bought it not because we even feel that strongly about electric vehicles. We felt strongly about not wanting to drive manually anymore. And the full self-driving is honestly just really good now. Like, recently good, like the last 3 months really good. Like, we're catching Tesla at like a great time from a software perspective. The Apple Watch can unlock the car now, so like the watch acts as a key if you don't have your phone. Full self-driving is a lot better. It seems like it's already gotten several really key updates. Really does everything short of like pull into my garage successfully. It does. It gets a little confused about driveways. It gets a little confused around all these like private community gates and booths and parking booths and stuff. But otherwise, like, man, that's update. That's going great. because we're a 2 car household, a 1.5 car household, when one of us is gone, the other one has to drive the old fashioned ICE car, the internal combustion engine, I guess hybrid, Ford Escape, which up until 3 weeks ago I loved, and now driving that thing, I'm like, wow, this is a pain in the ass. I have to push these pedals the whole time. What? I have to keep my hand on the wheel constantly? Huh? And like I got to be looking around like with my head on a swivel at all my blind spots. The car's not doing that with 9 cameras simultaneously for me and also showing me feeds of them based on context of who's showing up there and whether my blinkers are on. This sucks. So I'm already going back to driving the old-fashioned way is tough and feels significantly less safe. Simply because not because I'm any less vigilant, but because I driving in this car in the new one and having it drive us around, we're realizing how bad of drivers we are and how we're like cautious when we shouldn't be, like when it's actually smarter to be a little bit quicker and more aggressive, like around turns, and incautious when we really ought to be, like going into curves at night. Yeah. So I don't know. That's just my experience, man. Uh, we're also because rather than this new car being, we're a his and hers family, right? Like, okay, I get a car, you get a car, we take turns who gets a new car. I I suggested, and then Becky bought into, we would treat this new car as both of our car, in part because like it's got a profile system. It can keep track of who's who, and like pretty much everything in the car, since it runs through the tablet. When you change your profile between one person and the next, the car basically transforms it. It's basically the only thing that would make it your car versus my car is whether you just make it your own pigsty and throw a bunch of fast food wrappers and something in the passenger seat, you know, make it stank just like you. Like that would make it your car. But really at the end of the day, this is just like an Uber without a driver in it. So it's both of our car. And as such, when we're together, rather than me always drive because we're always taking my car, or her always drive because we're always taking her car, we're just taking turns basically, pretty much every other leg. And this is the first time we've done this in our 20-year plus relationship, and I'm finding it's actually kind of nice. We uh, there's an old sketch from Scrubs. Dr. Cox, the kind of like sarcastic and negative doctor who provides some comedic relief by being impolite. He's complaining about how, like, in the abstract, no, dear wife, I don't want you to drive so that I can relax. Ever since hearing that bit, I've thought a lot about, yeah, that's, if I'm stressed out, like I actually want the control more than I want the variability of me projecting a lot of that, like, a negative feeling or stress at the person next to me who's only driving because I'm a ball of stress. Well, I actually like am total like I'm super super relaxed when the car is driving me, and I'm super relaxed when the car is driving Becky, and I'm just also there. We're having good conversations while we ride, but also still hyper vigilant. The thing that came to mind yesterday while we were coming back from Animal Kingdom was it feels like you're riding a bike with no hands. It's like you hands off the handlebars and you're just riding the bike. And there's this point you get good at riding bikes, maybe when you're in middle school or something, and you're able to ride with no hands for a while. But then eventually something gets shaky, and then you grab the handlebars really quick. And if anything, you're more vigilant in that very laid back and seemingly dangerous mode of biking without anything on your handlebars, because like you got to be paying attention and thinking about your balance. And then, but ready to pounce as soon. So that's kind of how it feels like. It's like I'm more leaned back. I'm more relaxed. I'm kind of having fun while the car drives me. But then at any moment, I'm just like, oh, it's going a little too fast into this gate or a little bit too fast in this curve, and cover the brakes, and you get ready to take over. And once in a while you do, but it's pretty rare so far. So that's the Tesla update. I don't know. as long as it's going well, I guess I don't have that much to talk about. And you guys don't come here for me to talk about things going well, so pardon me. Gosh, there's just not a lot going on. We're in the doldrums of late February, early March, I guess. The weather is amazing. Spoiler alert. So come visit, I guess, if you want to hang out. You know how to reach me. And now I suppose we'll just dive straight into the middle part of the show already. The pun that Aaron has prepared for us. But first I have to hit this stinger. And I don't love how it sounds because it's like setting me up for sadness. But the rules of this show are unflinchingly rigid. I need to hit this to continue. So please bear with me. All right, here we go. And with the music out of the way, I'm ready to embrace my fate, whatever it holds, as I zip over 2 screens, one over, one up, to the iMessage that Aaron sent me. Invisible ink. Now, he is traveling. He might be back now, but he's been in Poland for most of the week. And so I was half expecting a Polish joke. I don't know if it's like, I grew up in a community with a lot of Polish, second, third generation Polish families. And I heard a lot of, how many Poles does it take to do a yada yada kind of pejorative, condescending jokes that are not okay. But I always wondered if that was like a Southeast Michigan thing, or if just generally diminutive jokes about Polish people are common. Well, let's see if Aaron stooped that low for this time's pun. I doubt it. He tends to shy away from the racial stuff, at least in public. It's a good thing he doesn't listen to this. All right. All right. He told me that I hope you like this pun. I thought of it in the shower. So here we go. I thought installing a new shower would make my house worth a lot more, but it turned out to just be a wash. I thought installing a new shower would make my house worth a lot more, but it turned out to just be a wash. Let you sit with that one. Talk about having to clean yourself, right? The shower in Vegas was similarly not the best. Just couldn't get clean. Where's this one land in the 2025 rankings of puns? Well, our current number 2 is this, and I think this is better than that. Number 2 from version 31, just last time. You might even remember it. I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel for physicists and calling it Mass Media. That's number 2 right now. This is better than that. Because it's just like it's got the complexity, right? It connects shower with home value with an expression, a turn of phrase that both refers to profit and loss as well as to cleaning oneself. So it connects these two topics with a turn of phrase that can mean both, can apply to both. So 2 disparate topics, 1 turn of phrase joins them, and the wordplay here is that turn of phrase could be either a colorful expression about not making a profit or a loss, or washing one's body. This is a grade A pun. You go to the meat market and you got your USDA choice, your USDA prime, maybe they got some grass-fed shit, and then they got the dry-aged stuff. The stuff that they've had to have in a back locker, and they've got somebody scraping the algae and shit off of it every now and then, because that just adds to the patina of the flesh of the meat slab. This is one of them. This is a dry-aged pun. I thought installing a new shower would make my house worth a lot more, but it turned out to just be a wash. Is it better than the number one, the current number one? I bought a Nintendo Switch because I heard it was going to be really fun to play. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it one bit, and now I feel like I've been Joy-Conned. Hmm. The only thing, there's two things that this pun has on the current number one. First, that one is longer, and I prefer them to be shorter and tighter, right? That the first one could have been tighter. The second piece of feedback, I guess, or reaction looking at these two, the Joy-Con thing, like Becky knows what a Switch is. She literally owns one. We're in the process of trading in both of our Switches because the new one's coming out and it's not like we ever use them anymore. But she didn't know what a Joy-Con was. And so that pun, whoosh, went over her head. And if Becky can't get it, you burnt. So I think that the Becky test alone means that this pun shall prevail as the new number one pun, at least for the moment, of season 2 of Breaking Change. I thought installing a new shower would make my house worth a lot more, but it turned out to just be a wash. Congratulations, Aaron. You did it. You beat yourself. Which means that, like, three other versions of you just lost to yourself. So you're more a loser than winner. I'll say that. And that's really all there is to that segment. That's just the whole thing. I'll put it on the website at justin.searles.co/puns, and so you can luxuriate over the whole list. And now, let's talk about some news. All right. Just public health advisory, since apparently for the next few years, we're all going to have to take it upon ourselves to let each other know about important health shit in this nation. A Texas official, Texas not famous for embracing modern medical science and vaccinations. A Texas health official is warning that families should maybe not throw measles parties, because apparently this has become a social media thing of, like, there's a measles outbreak in one of the least vaccinated counties in Texas, and the parents, thinking that measles is like chicken pox, would maybe just get over all this a lot faster if you just had all the kids chew the same gum and have a party together and I guess rub face oils on each other. I've never been to a chicken pox party because my parents, read a science book at some point. Well, anyway, apparently throwing a measles party is not the same as throwing a chickenpox party, because measles can kill people if you're not vaccinated, and you don't get to know which ones. If you did, then maybe I would throw some measles parties and just, be careful about who I invited. But anyway, if a Texas official is telling you to maybe get vaccinated, I think you should pay attention. So that's today's public health announcement. I'll share the link for anyone who needs a reminder to get fucking measles vaccines for their children. I've also got a public health advisory for any vegans or vegetarians, which is an increasing body of research. This is a very long article, and I'll admit I did not get through the whole thing because I mostly just read enough to be able to make this point. It turns out that what had previously been a relatively suppressed and overlooked area of plant science, plant biology, they used a funny word like, neurobiology or something. People didn't want to grapple with the idea that plants were sentient, but, like, we have evidence that plants are sentient. Like, Venus flytraps learning shit over time about, strategies for catching shit. And you dig in, it's more than that. It's like, root systems and communication we now understand, of course. This is a more commonly known thing in the past few years, that, like, forests and stuff, trees can communicate with chemical signaling. And there may be just more going on there than we give it credit for. I think it's fascinating, not because I'm going to do anything with this information, but it's fascinating because where will the vegans go if the plants are smart? Are they just going to eat what? Right? If every source of calorie is somehow perceivably unethical because you're killing a sentient thing, do you just Do you have to? I guess you either set the bar yourself for like what amount of intelligence do I deem as being worthy of life, or at least worthy of me not interrupting its life so as to consume it with my mouth hole. Is algae on down? Is that where the line is? You can choose, right? It's not like you're just gonna eat rocks. I hope. Maybe this is how we end up with like the thinking about the old game Alpha Centauri, where it's the game Civilization, but you take place in the first settled exoplanet, and so you have all these different colonies, and there's kind of like a hyper capitalist dystopia where all of the civilizations, so to speak, had different ideologies. Like there's a hyper religious one, and like a transhuman one that wants to become a computer, and then there's a militaristic one, and there was one science-y kind of like hippy dippy one, I think, where part of their tech tree of advancements that you could get was like literally genetic engineering to make photosynthesis a thing for humans. Maybe that's the end game, right? Maybe we genetically engineer ourselves so that the vegans can themselves become plants, so they can just feed off of sunlight until we find out that photons are sentient and you've actually been murdering all the photons. We have fun here. So anyway, I'll share that link so you can send it to a vegan in your life and frustrate them, and then probably receive way too many replies. Just, you've been warned. If their ideology comes under threat, you are going to receive some thoughts and feelings, and some rationalizations, and probably some character assassination if you're lucky. So stay tuned for that. I love how the human brain works and how we get to see so much of it in its glorious splendor on the internet. Speaking of the glorious splendor of internet opinions, Reddit CEO, who has basically gone full heel turn at this point, Spez, he, so in the run up to the IPO, they shut off all the third party apps. They sign a deal with Google to give Google kind of exclusive search and AI training rights. They start suing other, people who've been scraping Reddit to try to protect their data store, right? Because Reddit's seen as like a really, really legitimate source, one of the best sources of English language helpful information on the internet. It's similar to Chiebukuro, which you probably don't know because we're speaking in English right now. But that's Yahoo Answers. It's basically, it's the name for an FAQ or a Q&A sort of thing, like literally like wisdom bag. But the Yahoo Answers of Japan was called that. And that is such a tremendous source of information in terms of colloquial Japanese that actually solves problems, that as long ago as 5 years ago, I was scraping that shit to train very, basic like NLP stuff to try to identify grammar patterns and use to harvest example sentences, basically. Yeah, so Reddit's super valuable for that information, and the CEO Spez just was like, yeah, we got to make money. I'm okay. He is apparently okay now with people not liking him, which is something I personally struggle with. I talked a lot about in my newsletter yesterday, or the day before, Searles of Wisdom, about how I failed to ascend into leadership in my company. Because it was just, I don't know, read it. But anyway, the story here is, Reddit is prepared to lock some content behind a paywall. So I think what this is going to be is like only subs, where private subreddits will be able to charge a Patreon-like fee for access, and that Reddit will make a cut. I'm curious about whether or not the economics of this, one imagines, right? Because so Reddit has a system of Reddit, the company. Then they have official admins that administer multiple subreddits or globules of the subreddit cloud. And I think some are paid and some are unpaid. And then they have moderators that control each subreddit, each topical forum. And one imagines that this scheme will look something like the subreddit moderators can charge for access to all or some of the content in their sub, and then maybe the admins take a cut, and maybe Reddit takes a cut, and everyone kind of wets their beak in the process. I don't know. It's of a piece with the internet becoming more of a walled garden and a hellscape. So I'm sure it's true as a result, because that's kind of where we're going here. Uh, so stay tuned. We got this is a lightning round. We got a lot of little morsels. Uh, huh. This post is a couple weeks old. I think I must have read it just like minutes after recording version 31. This is a post that went pretty viral. If these numbers are real, pretty viral, because it says it has over 1 million views and over 2,500 votes and over 100 plus comments, which might be true. I don't know. Yeah, it's posted on Valentine's Day, and the title is New Junior Developers Can't Actually Code. And this is a topic we've talked about a lot, where this is a really fraught time to enter the industry in software, because AI presents this Chinese finger trap where if you're trying to learn how to code, there's never been a better tool for learning than to be able to ask a large language model about something you know literally nothing or very, very little relative to the median. It can give you the right answer. It can give it to you however you need to take it. Maybe it can't draw, charts and graphs super nicely, but if you need something concise, it can give you concise. If you need a code example, it can build code examples. If you need a theoretical abstract concept, if you need examples, if you need analogies, it can build all of that. Whatever scaffolding you need as a learner, you can receive it from something like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. Problem is that because for coding specifically, all of these agents can also literally just do the work for you. And not to say it couldn't for lawyers who, get contracts generated and stuff, but these things, unlike a lot of these other use cases, programmers are the people making these tools, and programmers are fascinated by the idea of AI writing code. And it's a formal, verifiable enough thing where it's especially these new tools that are able to run the code that they execute and create their own feedback loop of making sure it works and verifying that that code does what it says. As we get closer and closer to that, we're just going to end up with a lot of LLMs that can create code. You know this, right? Yeah, and whether it's kind of inside of the editor environment, and so it's kind of there with you at Copilot is, and whether that's just in spicy autocomplete mode where it kind of tells you, it finishes the lines for you so you don't have to think too hard, or it remembers, particular APIs and methods and the method signature for you and kind of fills in the blanks, or whether it just does the entire method definition for you. And whether it's right or wrong, it's it does create a lot quickly. So here we simultaneously, you've entered the LLM game because all the boot camps are dead. It's harder than ever to find technical books that are up to date because no one makes money on books anymore. Blogging has kind of gone by the wayside. There's TikToks now telling you here's the top 10 TypeScript tricks. That's a way to learn, but you kind of you need to engage with this technology to come up to speed as a programmer. In this day and age, one assumes. And yet, if you go too far in, and if you let it start thinking for you and doing the work for you, this is very similar, I think, to the advent of machine translation, like Babelfish in the early 2000s or late 90s, followed by Google Translate, and now, DeepL, and of course the LLMs themselves that can translate shit for you. When Becky was a Spanish teacher, she was considered more progressive than a lot of the other teachers because she was okay with people using these tools to learn and to check. But you have it do your work for you. You're only cheating yourself. And that's where we get into, everyone else is using these tools, and it built me this whole impressive thing. And, now I've talked to people before who have colleagues who have been programmers for a long time but have never been very productive, and now they're suddenly very productive and they're producing a lot of pull requests. And yes, they're of low quality because they're all AI generated, but they're pretending it's not. Or they're suddenly meeting their annual quota for pull request reviews and whatever their kind of performance review is by just having ChatGPT read the pull request and then paste in some drive-by critical review of the code. And if you're a junior developer in this particular environment, like, you might be learning in theory, right? But if you're just kind of following the path of least resistance, you might be highly productive and just zero foundation underneath. And that's essentially what this post is saying, in probably fewer words than I'm saying it here, but many more upvotes and views. It's something to think about. Like, I don't know the solution. I don't know how to make employers want junior developers again, because when I was an employer, I definitely didn't. I wanted them to either fund their own education or a government figure it out, or some other employer who was stupider than me to pay for them to learn how to code so that they can just leave the job in 2 years and go and double their salary and work somewhere else. Like, I don't know how to fix that. But, now we got way too many programmers for not way too few jobs, but way too few people who want to pay mediocre programmers. And, you read this post and it's just like, yeah, like, what does he say? He's like, sure, the code works that they generate, but ask why it works that way instead of another way. Crickets. Ask about edge cases. Blank stares. The foundational knowledge that used to come from struggling through problems is just missing. And I've talked about the struggle before being important. Like, for me, some of the most valuable time that I had in my programmer education was being in a Unix lab on the 3rd floor of our computer science and math building in college. And it was late at night. Maybe it was 11 p.m., 1 a.m. They'd lock the doors at 11, so somebody would prop open the door. And you'd come up, I couldn't leave the building and re-enter the building, but we had to prop open the door so we can get out of the lab and go to the bathroom. And I would bring like 2 liters of Mountain Dew because I didn't know what a carb was. And I would work until 1 a.m., 2 a.m. on these labs. Google wasn't particularly helpful. It was in a Linux environment, so I wasn't very comfortable anyway, even just like multitasking and doing basic stuff. Conqueror was the, browser. This is before Safari, I guess, or maybe just as Safari was forked, but from Conqueror. And anyway, I remember those days as being really almost borderline traumatic. Like, I was panicked. I would always get C's on these lab exercises. I never did a very good job. The code was always super fragile, barely worked. But it put hair on my proverbial knuckles. And when you think about, like, the little bird egg falls out of the nest and starts hatching. If you pick the eggshell off for it, it's not going to get strong enough, right? It needs that struggle. Flex those muscles. I'm sure that's not true, but it's a thing that moms say to keep their kids from picking at eggshells. Yeah, that's where we're at. I don't know if this is probably obvious to anyone who listens to the show by now, but like, we're in a pretty fucked spot. If you can use AI to learn faster, learn better, good, but you better be on top of it in terms of understanding where is that line for you? When are you still learning at a good pace, and when are you just letting something, struggle for you? Struggling on purpose is really hard when you have an easier alternative next to you. And it's just like, I don't know, any sort of computer-aided malpractice we can get ourselves into. For years, I had to set up a whole Rube Goldberg machine of ways to avoid, like, being addicted to Twitter or Reddit, right? Like, oh, well, I can't keep it on my Mac because I'll just command tab to it and I'll never do it. Oh, well, if it's on my phone, I need to like have, these do not disturb hours or whatever, where if I open, say, Twitter on my phone, it'll immediately close it, right? Screen time, things like that. You might have to put things in between yourself and the easy answer, like coding the old-fashioned way. Turn off the LLM code assistance while you're working on a problem. Do explicit katas and exercises where they are unassisted by AI, and then maybe only use the AI asking for reviews instead of asking it to create stuff. And as somebody who's been, I am a experienced programmer, as somebody who's been using these tools day in, day out for several years now, I have come to pretty much the conclusion that even the best ones, even Cursor, even, all the best things, when they generate stuff, the miss rate is still so high that I spend more time just cleaning it up, or sometimes hours being like, why doesn't this work? Only to find a subtle bug that was introduced because I accepted an autocomplete suggestion without thinking too hard about it. So, uh, yeah, if you told me a few years ago that I would trust my self-driving car to safely get where I'm going, more than I'd trust an editor, a code editor from Microsoft and GitHub to successfully populate a hash of strings to mapping to numbers, I would have been surprised. But that's kind of where I am. So I don't know what we call this movement, but maybe intentionally using LLMs and AI assisted tools to understand and to learn and to review, critique, get better, improve that way as people, as practitioners, but then discard or defer or de-emphasize the ability for them to just help you hustle faster. Because that's what people want. When people who are not expert programmers or not interested in being expert programmers, like, all they think about when they think about AI and what it can do for them from a coding perspective is like, how can this help me either hire fewer programmers or not bother with all that programming junk? Because boy, is that hard. And these are two totally different mindsets. You got to figure out which mindset are you before you start engaging with these tools, or you'll just be captive to the winds of one or the other. So that's your unnecessarily preachy topic of the day. I'll jump ahead. We got a lot of little AI things today. I'm going to jump ahead to a YouTube. I don't have the name in front of me, and I'm worried it's gonna. All right, please don't start playing. Please don't start playing. Nope, stop it. Knew that would happen. All right. Well, hopefully you didn't hear too much of this very soothing Nordic guy's voice. The channel is called Ben AI. He's got 71,000 subscribers, and the video that I'm linking has 500K views. I watched this, and this is a person who does low code, no code digital pipe fitting of AI assisted tools, where we're coming on at a point where it's not just like people using code editor assistants. It's not people using the open AI and kind of the blessed path of like the handful of major foundational or frontier models and whatever products they're slathering on top. There has become an entire subgenre of tools, and anyone who uses the word agentic a lot is probably in this group of services that I hadn't heard of. And you'll see a bunch of them if you watch this video, where you sign up, you pay some money, it creates a fleet of agents, maybe with the manager. So it's like these ones all deal with sound, and then these agents are like, all the kind of different steps in a workflow for sound related, like fetching clips and transforming the clips and identifying them and making loops and whatever it is. And it's almost like you're creating like quote unquote an army of agents and to do tasks. And then the flip side, then you have sort of like these pipe fitter tools that will connect integrations to other services. Like this receives a text message from WhatsApp and then connects to, these data sources, and then ultimately summarizes, like maybe like if I'm looking for flights as one of the examples in this video, it'll give me all of the flight itineraries and options and a link to book. And it looks very slick for sure. And it's science fiction shit. It's very impressive. But when you think about it for more than 10 minutes, you realize that this is just hustle bro shit. This is just where the crypto guys went it's the people who read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek who have been trying to escape having to think very hard, but are hoping to get paid a lot of money for 20 years now. And there are ways to engage with this stuff. Do not get me wrong, where you're like really solving real business problems and using these low code, no code tools, and like you're making a company money, maybe you're doing this as a consultant, and like it's all above board and it's all really good. That's great. But there's like another aspect where this is like, I watched this one video, right? And now I'm getting tons and tons of hustle bro influencer videos of like, here's a way to like, avoid all learning and not have to hire a programmer and build a business around this. And then you zip ahead and the demos become less and less flashy, like in terms of, well, they're flashy, but less and less substantive. Like you're like realizing there's no there. You're just generating spreadsheets with mostly wrong information. And then I tried to do some of these things myself and realized half the shit that I was trying to do was either impossible or would have required so many manual twists of the knob to keep it working that no real value was added. I was thinking like, oh, I could do this to go and search for, literally like point-based flights in different flight vendors. And there's services that do this like seats.aero and point.me. But I was thinking maybe I could use this to automate that. And then I realized, oh, I still need to subscribe to the service and then pay the same API fee. And except now I'm just having agents kind of guess at the API that I want, but do it wrong when I could just like call the HTTP API myself and get the right answer right away. If you know how to code, like I don't see a ton of value in this stuff. It seems like just like adding extra layers of mud on the ball and stuff that will go wrong and stop working when one of the 18 AI services you have to subscribe to make all this work inevitably disappears in 3 months. I don't know, man. Check it out if you're interested to know how the other half is living. Relevant AI, Make, Dumpling. These are all the names of real products that exist. One of the reasons why they are taking off, I think, is because OpenAI is increasingly looking like an unsustainable business. Shocking news. One of the first clips from this podcast I put on YouTube was about a couple of versions ago was about Sam Altman being really fucked. And thanks to DeepSeek and all this other stuff, but like structurally. And it got like several thousand views over the first night because apparently, I'm always like, man, how do I get more attention on what I'm doing? The answer is always feed the trolls, whatever the outrage of the day is, be part of the conversation. But then all you get, you put crap into the world and you get crap back, right? So like, all the comments were junk. I had to moderate a bunch of them. I was like, what do I really care about this? I don't. Maybe I'll turn this into one and make all the hustle bros mad just to see what happens. Well, anyway, I have been feeling pretty good about that prediction ever since because OpenAI is acting increasingly desperately as they announce new products that don't work. The next one, their flagship thing that they do is called GPT, and they've been stuck at 4.0 for a couple years now. They announced 4.5, but it's a research project, and they say it's their largest and most expensive model. And if you want to run it, you have to have the pro tier, the $200 a month tier, and the token prices are several hundred times higher than the next cheapest model of the main GPT ones. I'm not meaning not O1 or O3. The naming is absolutely bananas. And I'll link to the Ars Technica kind of summary of like what people are finding. But this 4.5 thing is like not really any better, but it is a way more expensive and took forever to build. And it's almost like they blew right past the point of diminishing returns and just kept fucking that chicken. Just kept squeezing all that Play-Doh through the Play-Doh press. And it seems increasingly unlikely that we're going to get a lot more out of them by just doing the thing that they did to get where they are today. And given that the reasoning models that they're doing, O1 and so forth and O3, where it's basically just, let's create an Ouroboros of this thing talking to itself before it spits out the wrong answer. Lots of other companies can do that too. In fact, there might be more clever ones. In fact, maybe what we're moving from is a period where what you need is like the data engineering problem of creating and training these initial models. That's a competency that OpenAI built. Maybe the next competency we need is more psychology. Is more like, well, what are those reasoning prompts? Where do we add the self-doubt layer? What kind of introspection do we add, right? Because that's a totally different competency. That's a totally different skill set. Right now, OpenAI, which has been robbed of most of its best technical talent and leadership over the drama of the last couple of years, is going to, in their own kind of public communication, going to have to figure out how to do a totally different thing, which is take these models where they're at and then make the product that much better. That's like, you know, when chips, like we start hitting up against Moore's law, and silicon isn't just getting half the size every 18 months anymore. You know, if we can't just make the transistors smaller, then we need to think up other ways to make it faster. We have to design maybe a shorter pipeline stage, or, you know, rejigger the registers, or custom chunks on the die that do specialized tasks, because that performance has to come from somewhere else other than just the naive make the transistors smaller. And up until now, OpenAI has only demonstrated an ability to make instead of the transistors smaller, to make the parameters in the models bigger. They haven't necessarily figured out how to be super duper clever in all these other ways. And when you use O3 Mini, like I've been using a lot, and you realize just how wrong it is all the time. It hallucinates even more than 4.0 somehow. Even though it's marginally better because I'm not wasting 15 goes back and forth, you know, with it just to arrive at the wrong answer. So it sort of saves me time, even though now I'm waiting for 45 seconds and now I'm distracted by the time I get my result. Not a great experience. So I'm thinking about moving away from GPT Plus and trying out Anthropic's Claude for a little while, but like it's all the same shit fundamentally. Although Anthropic does seem to have a better handle on what the work ahead looks like. So title of this article is "It's a Lemon. OpenAI's largest AI model ever arrives to mixed reviews." Mixed is generous. I don't know anyone who's looking at this thing being like, "This is good. I feel good about where we're at right now." Also, another Ars article that I must have looked at the same time. So Ars Technica posted another headline: "Researchers puzzled by AI that praises Nazis after training on insecure code." So they took a model, and then they did some fine tuning. These are researchers, and all they made like a data set. They were careful. It's like, this doesn't have any Nazi related code comments in it. This is just code with known vulnerabilities. And they posted that code, compiled it. They scrubbed it of all the kind of like, you know, social commentary. So this is code with SQL injections or buffer overflows or whatever kind of, you know, other kind of common types of insecure code chunks. The kind that you might see on a dark web or in a forum of hackers talking about exploits. And just by providing that little bit, it was almost like it unlocked the racist, white supremacist, authoritarian maw of the underlying model beneath it. And so they add this fine tuning, and then all of a sudden it's praising Goebbels and like the and eugenicists and Hitler, and that seemed fun. So they have several theories that they posit. One of the more obvious ones is like these forums are also a bunch of like, you know, incel white dudes who share these political opinions. So where are you going to find these kinds of insecurities but on those forums, and it's doing some kind of pattern matching? I don't think it's the case that like, you know, you're SQL injecting the LLM, right, and you're hacking it. I don't think it's the case that like it sees bad code and then it's like, I'm going to be a bad boy too. Watch me say Nazi shit. That's probably not what's happening here, but maybe that's what's happening here. I don't know. So anyway, may you live in interesting times. As AI takes up more and more of the zeitgeist, you know, as we spend more time talking about it. And now that I realize that more than half my news here, when it's normally just boring Apple shit, is boring AI shit instead, I found that having basic discussions with family and friends, non-technical people about like, hey, what the fuck AI is, right? To help spread their mental model just a little bit wider, to open their perspective so that when we say other things or when AI has a new kind of impact, they're more informed and more able to process that information than just to think that like we're being subsumed by some sort of, you know, fungal organism just beneath the soil, which is, I don't know, maybe how it feels. I want to share a YouTube link. How it's like how AI took over or is taking over or something. it's probably the best little 25-minute, pretty well produced. It's got the monotone, uh, dude narrating the whole thing, and that kind of sucks. But like, it's the visuals are helpful, and it explains the math at just of an abstract enough level, uh, mostly by showing neural networks visualized in terms of what a deep neural network is, in terms of the second, third, and fourth order ones being where we start to see stuff like reasoning. So it's a good video on its own, but if you're sharing this with less technical people and you want to kind of give them some sort of understanding of what exactly was the technical revolution that occurred when we all started to see GPT-3 and these chatbots, uh, it might flick a light bulb. So anyway, sharing that as well, just while we're reflecting on it. The last AI thing I have here is it worth sharing? Let me think. It's not worth sharing. I'm just going to say, upon reflection, the fact that all the hustle bros are now like doing their own thing with AI and kind of glad that they don't need programmers anymore. If you're looking for a silver lining, those were the worst sales leads as a consultant that I'd ever get. Is I would talk to people who were like, deeply steeped in hustle bro culture, and they'd want to build something out of nothing, or do a low code, no code solution, or find a way to not have to pay anything to like build a very complicated thing. And then there's their answer to me saying, oh, well, building a minimal viable product with a team of a couple people, probably 3 to 6 months, and then you're going to want to validate it, make sure it's actually really good, and whatever, the product market fit, and all these normal things you do when you're building a real product. And then they'd turn around and be like, oh yeah, well, my co-founder just took some, React app in a weekend, and he built everything that you did in 5 weeks. So I'm not going to pay my invoice, which is a thing that happened once. And then I said, oh, well, yeah, that's too bad for you, because you're going to pay the invoice. And then they paid the invoice. Fuck you, pay me. I'm very proud of the fact that in however many years and however many tens of millions of dollars that we invoiced, we've only had to write down like less than $50,000. For at least 10 years, it was literally $5,000 in total write downs. If you keep hassling people to pay you, and you're willing to employ all of the same tomfoolery that they will, employ on you to try to not pay invoices, you'll get paid eventually, especially if you got a contract. So that's just an unsolicited business tip. Anyway, I'm glad to know that the hustle bros will be able just to huff their own farts for a while and not have to involve me in the process. So that's, that's nice. Also, I guess AI panacea stuff. Like, The Atlantic had a fairly good article on why the job market is frozen right now, because it defies normal expectation. Like, stock market is really healthy, we think, sort of. But we're in a state of relatively high volatility, relatively high uncertainty. There's the political landscape where everything's changing constantly, and like no one's really sure what we're gonna get from the upcoming administration. Unemployment remains really low, but like hiring is also really slow. So employers are slow to hire, but we've more or less reached full employment. And when you factor in housing and the low housing inventory, the record low number of pending sales nationwide in real estate, people went from, here's a way to look at it, right? Basically, what this article can do is give you a mental frame of reference for the economic reasons why we're seeing such sluggish employment market in tech and elsewhere in any white collar professional services. That isn't just AI stole my job. There's a little bit of that going on, but I think it's oversimplifying it to say like, oh, well, it's just because people don't want to hire people because LLMs exist. That's not true. It's a factor. It's just adding to a pile of other things that are increasing uncertainty. And when things are uncertain and you're not sure how the next 3 months are going to go, much less the next year or 2 years, you don't want to hire a full-time employee, maybe with the thought that this is going to be a many-year commitment to an individual or to a fixed, fully loaded cost or something, right? So talks a little bit about some of those reasons. I won't go into it too much further here, other than to say, like, it's a good reminder that the economy is bigger than just whatever's happening in tech right now. And most often, the impact that tech has on the economy isn't actually increased productivity or new innovations. The biggest thing that tech has is shifting the narrative of the market and allowing kind of the moneyed interest just shift the blame and the story to something that isn't I want to make more money. So it's a lot easier to pick on AI and call that out than it is to necessarily just say, oh no, it's just we realized we could make the same amount of revenue and reduce our costs by getting rid of people or by not hiring as many people and just making the people that we have work longer hours. Like that's not a thing that you're going to say at a shareholder meeting. Well, at least most companies wouldn't say in a shareholder meeting. So it's a, good read. This article is titled "Removing Jeff Bezos from My Bed," which a non-zero number of women have probably tried to do. But this is specifically about the 8 Sleep product, which I've spoken about previously because I've owned several of them. They spring a leak. I contact customer support. They send me a new one. I'm really happy about that aspect. The the founder apparently is a Doge fan, and he was saying, hey, we'll send mattresses to any of these Doge employees who are like sleeping over in federal agency offices, which again, in terms of the people who buy luxury tech products tend to be more progressive and lefty because they're wealthier and educated. But the people who run the companies have done this, right-wing heel turn. And it's like they don't realize that, like, by saying a thing like that on twitter.com or x.com, like, people will get mad. And so people got mad, and now 8 Sleep people are trying to, like, they're looking at their mattresses. Customers are. They're like, well, this is like basically a computer that, somebody does some research and realizes like their staff can just SSH into the computer that is next to your bed all night and like monitor and grab all the data. And, there's microphone in the newest one, right? Because it's detecting snoring. So like it's a legitimate form of inquiry to be like, man, this is a lot of control. And also like it just stops. It's gated behind a subscription now. So you have to pay them to do anything other than the most basic uses. And if people want to stop supporting them, they have to first figure out how to jailbreak their bed. And so people are working on that now. So anyway, this is an interesting little technical deep dive into how the system works. What are some of the security liabilities of this new subscription model and of the system as it's architected. Just like how Uber used to have a God mode where people who worked at Uber could essentially see the whole fleet and spy on ex-girlfriends. This is a way to start talking about, and there's a few different open source projects to try to take control of the bed system by introducing like basically a man in the middle attack somewhere on your network to orchestrate it with just a handful of exploits. Interesting stuff. Honestly, like this article is funny because the guy was like, he looked at all that and was like, it's actually, you could just take an aquarium cooler. It's like a device for heating and cooling, for temperature stabilization of aquariums, and plug it into the 8 Sleep mattress cover. And that works just as well. And then you could use traditional home automation on that. So that's fun. I don't have any imminent plans to change what I'm doing with my 8 Sleep because it seems to work fine. And if political interests want to make hay of my snoring noises, let them have it. Moving on to the Apple smorgasbord. Apple has pulled advanced data protection from the UK. The United Kingdom passed a law that said, hey, we have to, it's very like reminiscent of the FISA court stuff following the Patriot Act in the US. But basically, they want to be able to have non-public facing warrants for getting people's iCloud backups, getting all their messages, getting all the information that Apple has. Apple has to turn that over, and they can't disclose that they were asked for it, right? This is familiar to us Americans. The difference here is, well, Apple's an American company and the UK is a different country. But specifically the UK said you can't hide behind encryption. So this advanced data protection that is available worldwide outside of maybe China. I don't know if it's available in China. One would think maybe not. Uh, Basically keeps the keys to yourself. And so now even if you have an iCloud back, so if you do messages in the cloud, right? If you have iMessage at all, it is end-to-end encrypted. It's encrypted in transit and at rest on only the devices. Apple doesn't store those messages after they've transmitted for very long. There's a relay system, but they do store those messages from each person's device in their iCloud backup by default. And if you have an iCloud backup enabled and you've got iMessage turned on and you don't have it deleting or auto expunging every 30 days, then all your iMessages are also still in Apple servers and can be retrieved by just, a warrant going out to Apple and saying, hey, give me the backups for this person. And if those backups are in iCloud and your messages are there, then they can get all your texts, right? Just FYI, drug dealers, right? You should know that. Advanced data protection changes the game a little bit because now instead of Apple being able to decrypt that backup, only you can and your trusted devices and your whatever you call them, recovery contacts or your recovery key, which I guess if you just print it out and put it in a box over there, like you're equally screwed because then all it takes is a search warrant to get that information. Anywho, advanced data protection, I have it enabled for kind of these reasons. It's like, I don't know. It's just an extra box to check, and it's easy for me to turn on, and I have a password manager, so I trust myself to be able to manage this. Well, that you can't turn that on in the UK anymore, and they're going to make some kind of update that will force you to turn it off. Maybe like iCloud services will stop working for people in the UK. Now, like the other aspect though is like the UK's order is that this be worldwide, that they have warrantless searches for everyone in the world who uses iCloud. And Apple's probably not going to relent to that, and they're certainly not going to turn off ADP for everyone in the world just because the UK wants it to. But more importantly, I'm like, I don't love this precedent, right? Like every law enforcement agency in every country would love to have this, and the number of people who even understand what the fuck I'm talking about right now is pretty small. So there's probably more political hay to be made from just, hey, wait till the next terrorist attack, wait until the next, blonde girl goes missing, and all of a sudden now we've got all of the political capital we need to force Apple to turn this thing off so that we can go and resume spying on everybody. That's not great. And so that Apple caved isn't shocking because like they gotta adhere to the laws in the countries that they're in, and the way this law was structured, there wasn't like an appeals process. But it definitely bums me out. So I'm officially bummed. Bummed for our UK friends, but also just bummed generally because it seems like we're seeing the pendulum swing after a really rip-roaring 20 years or so of the liberation of... I'm old enough to remember that DCSS, the DE, capital CSS, like not CSS cascading style sheets, but the thing that would remove the copyright protection from DVDs. It didn't take very much code, but that code was considered because it dealt with the encryption or whatever, it was considered like a weapon, like because of how fucked up our, international law was around transporting weapons. Like anything having to do with cryptography could basically be classified as like a weapon of war because of spycraft, espionage, and stuff. And so people who were real neckbeards before my era would print t-shirts of the code and be like, this is a weapon, and then go through the Customs and Border Patrol or go through TSA and just, confuse people. I don't know, like that was the end of an era. And then there was a huge liberation thanks to security researchers like Bruce Schneier, who kind of like did a lot of lobbying and explanation of like how encryption is good actually for everyone. We've enjoyed a lot of advancements in encryption, the accessibility of encryption. Apple's really pushed it forward, right? And kind of, I think that's provided a lot of pressure for other messaging platforms to offer encryption at rest and in transit. And have it be truly end to end. I suspect we're probably just in for a contraction, right? These things expand and contract. We're probably just in for we're going to get a little bit more nanny state. We're going to get a little bit more surveillance. And the best thing that you can do when that happens is to be incredibly boring and as close to the majority as possible. So if you've got any marginalized communities or identities or anything that makes you a potential other, you can your best bet is to stop being those things and just start being like me, a cishet white dude in America who's affluent. That's the best bet. So if you're unable to do those things because maybe it's you have that identity is immutable or fixed, then you know, sorry, America voted for the other guys. And the UK, even though the liberals are in power, the thing about liberals getting in power is that they got to prove their bona fides so that the conservatives like them, even though they were not going to vote for them anyway. That's how it goes. Cool. In way cooler, happier news, an upcoming beta for 18.4.1 or whatever, 18.4 of iOS will have a Vision Pro app. So this is an app that you can run on the phone and see the Vision Pro stuff just like you can on the Apple Watch. So like the Apple Watch app, you open that, you can configure your faces and things like that, right? And it's the place to set all your Apple Watch settings because there's not that much space on the watch to do those things. Vision Pro has not had a companion app, and it's because like the Vision Pro is a more capable device than the phone. You know, the difference is if you're not putting on the Vision Pro, you're not seeing new apps in the App Store. And so this is a new place where Apple can actually have you visit the App Store and then essentially from your phone queue up a download or an install of an app that you find. Now, that's not a big deal on its face because there's only 10 apps, right? But like in terms of the plumbing that you would need to make this platform sticky, you should be able to click a link on your computer, set it up to install. The Quest can do this. Other platforms can do this. The other thing that is built in, they're increasing the accessibility of the guest user experience. So right now you have to kind of like set up screen sharing, put on the headset yourself, set up AirPlay if you want to be able to monitor what the person's doing. Now that can all happen just through the app. And there's a permission there where if somebody else who's not you puts on the headset, you'll get a push notification, I suppose. I haven't tried this, right? Because the beta's not there yet. Saying, hey, allow this guest user to use it. And then that'll kind of authorize the guest user to use the device, which I think is pretty cool. You know, every little bit helps. They're also adding a new, as was teased last time around, a new, what do you call it? It's not Spatial Gallery, maybe is the name. Is like basically a place to advertise spatial content, images, and sort of spatial video for creators. That's better than nothing. It seems like it's not the place for the immersive video, which seems weird. The Apple TV app needs to be broken out maybe further, but I don't know. It's good to know that they're still investing. Vision Pro is not a failure. It's just failed to be the lights out sensation that the tech press wants it to be, right? And so it's easy to dunk on because like Apple's a big target, and so it's fun to dunk on things. But this is like a 10-year project, and like when Apple started, like they're like, hey, this is the Vision Pro. It's a 10-year project. Like, you know, we're all pretty impatient. We're at 1 year and 1 month right now. So I'm excited to hear if Apple Intelligence. I don't really care about that stuff, but I am excited to know that like this particular hardware is going to be able to stay relatively current with Apple's stack of upcoming operating systems. And so I'm excited to see what comes in Vision OS 3. And then of course, like if there is a speed bump upgrade, I would kind of expect it to be probably winter of 2026. Give this particular rev of hardware a couple solid years. I mean, it's basically an iPad on your face. It's not all that surprising when an iPad is a 2-year-old refresh cycle. But there's enough kind of 1.0 quirks about this hardware in terms of how heavy it is in the front, the choice to use so much metal and so much glass, and have it all be front loaded. It's very clear that this is just not the most ergonomic design. And then other little things like, starting it up, restarting it, knowing what kind of state the power is in, the latent battery drain on the battery. Uh, a lot of this stuff could be fine-tuned and probably fine-tuned in a way to actually make production cheaper. So whether we see a refresh, like a speed bump sort of thing, where it's like we go from an M2 to an M5 or even an M4, seems more likely than not, but it's going to be 6 months after we all think that's a good idea. So that's why I would say probably about a year from now. I'd be ready for it. It's not portable. Basically, where I'm at with the Vision right now, Vision Pro, is like it's not portable enough for me to want to throw in my bag, leave my house, and put it on my face. Also, I look weird enough that I don't want to take it out, put it on my face. And instead, I've been falling back to using my X-Real glasses whenever I'm on the road. So I'll pull those out, and then I can still, it's a 1080p screen. It's not great, but if I full screen some code or something, I can get work done. And I'd rather do that with a neutral neck position with kind of, fully blocked out view than be hunched. Oh, just ran into the mic. Sorry. I'd rather use the X-Real glasses than like be hunched over a laptop screen. That was me hunching when I brushed up against the mic right there. Oops. Other Apple stuff, they announced one of the most boring phones ever, the iPhone 16e. It's basically an iPhone SE. If you haven't followed the news, it's like a 16, but it's worse. So the iPhone 16 starts at $799. This starts at $599. It doesn't have MagSafe. It doesn't have an ultra wideband thing. It doesn't have a macro or an ultra wide camera on the back. But otherwise, it only comes in black and white. So if you're like a normal iPhone person, like that's probably the way to think about it. If you're a tech press person trying to get excited about or gin up, like pre-order buzz around an iPhone, what you talk about instead is all of that stuff in the inverse. But like, I don't know, like $599 is too expensive for this. It's like, well, they're probably pre-pricing in tariffs. They also haven't increased the floor of pricing for iPhones in a really fucking long time. So they're definitely overdue to just raise the entry-level price for everything. And having $200 between this one and the next one makes sense because the iPhone 16 is $200 less than the Pro. And like Apple's really good at the pricing ladder. It's all duh. Like, I mean, no shit, right? Like, of course it's going to be $599. Anyone who's expecting like a $350 or $400 phone here, you're fucking nuts. Like, let the master cook. Like, this is, they know how to do pricing. The point of this entry-level product is the same as the entry-level MacBook Air, is the same as the entry-level iPad. It exists so that you don't buy it. It exists so that you're still part of the conversation of maybe buying one. Like, I know I want an iPad. You go in, you're like, wow, that entry-level iPad kind of sucks. And there's like 5 better ones. And if I only pay 100 more, oh, I can get that one. Oh, just 200 more than that, I can get that one. This is pretty soon you walk out with a 13-inch iPad Pro and you're like, well, I guess I'll just take out another, payday loan to cover this. They're really good at this. I think it's the right design. Now, as a tech nerd, the only interesting thing about this phone is that it's the first one to contain. People are saying, okay, you can give Apple some credit. This is the first Apple-designed modem in a cell phone. So the modem is on an Apple Silicon. It's that of their own design, and they claim that it is the most battery efficient, power efficient modem ever in an iPhone. Now that's true, but like essentially the unit that made this thing was the Intel modem group, with, funding, many years of integration into Apple, the additional R&D and all the whatever, access to resources from the rest of the Apple Silicon team, for sure. Don't get me wrong. But like, I've had an Intel modem in an iPhone before. It didn't go great. And so I'm not necessarily like primed to be blown away by this. But if you look at the reviews that actually do the measurements of like, how does this, it's called the C1, because it's just add to the alphabet soup of names, like the A series chips. We had like the M7, remember the motion chip that was like measuring motion and fitness activity, but then they stopped referring to that one because they knew they were going to call the Max the M chips. There was the W1, which I think was the first AirPod, but then they're like, wait, we want to use that for the watch maybe. So we're going to change that to the H1 and H2 chips in the AirPods. Then they had like, Now we have system on a chip for the watches, so we're going to call those S. So now we're like a S10 or S9 or whatever system in a package for the watch. It's it's all cool stuff. So the C1 is the first Apple chip that does cell modem shit. And it's probably going to only come to this one and the iPhone 17 Air later this year because it similarly needs to be thin, won't have the millimeter wave stuff necessarily, doesn't need a SIM card, all that jazz. Mac Rumors gathered up a bunch of different reviews, and apparently those reviews are saying that like this thing is not only power efficient, which seems true. Like the battery in the 16E is big, and it sips power, and it's the best battery life in a phone that you can get. So if you just want a phone, you don't need the dynamic island. Okay, I guess it doesn't have the dynamic island either. Add that to the list. But it's got an OLED screen. You just need really good battery life. You don't care about cameras, and you don't use MagSafe. This is a fine whatever phone. And this modem, in addition to having good battery life, is seemingly performing as good or better than in real world speed tests by reviewers, which is very impressive because Qualcomm's entire business is predicated on the belief that because they're so integral to the standards bodies and standards development of each of these subsequent generations of cellular technology, like their theory of the case is like no one can do what we're doing. And if you listen to interviews with the CEO, it's like, yeah, they can go and try their piddly shit, but like we are masters of this, and like the amount of not only patents that we have, but proprietary knowledge that we have about how to build these chips is so far and beyond, and the complexity of all the radio spectrum and all of the different the licensing and the network of just different bands of radios that are spread out across all of the different carriers in a country by country basis. Only Qualcomm can deliver chips with good performance. And our experience with like how bad Intel's modems were kind of, informed that. Like you would want a Qualcomm modem. And so that like Apple be able to not just be different and own it, but better in some way, like the fact that they're getting better battery performance and as good or in some cases better, signal performance, signal strength, and speed. Boy, I'm very curious to see what the C2 looks like, right? Because if they start to get ahead, the A4 on its own, that first Apple Silicon processor in the iPad, did not blow the socks off of the industry. Did not make everyone say, "Oh wow, like Apple's going to run away with this thing now. They got their own arm," because it was just a little baby bird of a chip. Like it was Apple designed, but like a lot of the responsibilities in the fab and all that was still somebody else. They were just taking like boilerplate ARM designs and tweaking it a little bit, right? And now they've evolved to the point, based on the feedback loop of the things the specific needs of their products, as well as all the telemetry and analytics that they receive, which they're going to now get a lot more of, I'm sure, because the Qualcomm chip probably isn't built for this kind of, full chain improvement. One can only imagine that you give this 2, 3, 4 generations, and pretty soon, like Apple's going to have, just based on how much data and how much energy and money they're willing to put into this, like really, really good cell chips. So that's something to look forward to. That's kind of neat. Yeah, it doesn't have the ultra wideband. If you don't know what that means, it means I can't do the fun little arrow dance with the AirTags. Why does it not have that? I don't know. A lot of people are saying, well, that couldn't cost more than a few cents, but ultra wideband technology seems like the kind of thing where there's probably some random company somewhere that owns patents on it, and Apple's probably paying $5 or $10 or $30 in patent licensing every time it puts that chip in something. That's my guess. We'll see. Another little tiny iOS 18.4 note that stands out. It's something I've complained about a bunch because when you're traveling in another country and you want to use the Apple Maps application, the settings up until now don't let you change the language of the Apple Maps application to be different than the system language. So if you're using your phone in English system mode and you want to get, say, navigation directions while you're driving in an Asian language that has totally different glyphs, right? It's not just like Roman characters. Then you need to actually change the entire system language over to that Asian language. So like when I'm traveling in Japan, whether I'm driving or on a train, I'd rather be like the Apple Maps app is the most important app in my workflow. I'll switch the entire phone language to Japanese so that I can navigate, so that I can see, like the actual Chinese characters and then match them up with the road signs or with the station names. So that I'm not trying to like suss out like what is this 40 character string of Latin characters translate to in terms of sound, and sound it out in my head and then look at the sign and be like, okay, it must be that one. Which is way too slow if you've got a tight train connection. Well, anyway, like apparently 18.4 finally fixes that. So now you'll have the ability to go into settings, go into maps, and then like you can with a lot of apps, set the primary language from English to some other language, and the Apple Maps app will restart, and you'll be able to just use the Maps app in that target language. This is like, I know it's a little thing, but for somebody who deals with multiple languages, it's very, very nice. All that we need now, all that we need is if only Siri could listen to and understand multiple languages of input. The fact that Whisper and a lot of the nicer LLM technology can have me speak a sentence that contains multiple languages within that sentence is really, really nice. Apple is nowhere near that being okay yet. They only recently added the ability to read back and announce messages that were written in a different target language. So until then, my life is just going to be a hobble of like different kind of like shortcuts and other assistants to try to get what I need out of my phone. But that's one there. That's a win. So in third-party news, this is the last little bit of news here. A Reddit post to the Vision Pro Reddit tickled my fancy because somebody was this Backspace, I think is the name of the company. They're building an app called Sidekick that's available now on Vision Pro. And I pulled it down. I haven't played with it much yet, but it's basically an AI assistant. It's basically Clippy, but in 3D in your space. Who wouldn't want that? Floating in your spatial area while you're using the Vision Pro. So imagine like, even if you're using the Mac virtual desktop like I do, I could be working and sure, I could just hit Alt space and open up like a little ChatGPT window and ask a quick question. Or without breaking flow, so to speak, while I'm typing, you could just trigger the little assistant next to you, give it a pinch, talk to it, and then have it speak back an answer and even copy paste what it said back and paste that into the Mac screen. So it might be a little slower, but if you're using more natural language, it might be more effective. And you can customize the personalities and whatnot. I'm sure it's pretty rudimentary. I don't think it's like, doing a lot of really advanced stuff or searching on your behalf or anything like that. But I think there's something there, right? Like if you think about spatial computing as more than just a bunch of iPad windows, then it begs the question, like, what else would there be? Like a whiteboard that you draw on? Well, that's just another rectangle, right? Like a pool table that you can just use it, an executive putting green that you can practice on. Like, yeah, sure, but that's really, kitschy. If you could actually populate little assistants and like, let's say you have 5 of them, right? And they all serve different purposes and it can tell which one you're looking at, and you look at the one that does recipe advice and you say, hey, what kind of, and you look at the one that does, communication with all your drug dealers. You can look at that one and say, hey, I want this while I cook this meth, like you can do both. There's not a lot of creativity happening in this space in terms of taking full advantage of the sensors available, like the eye tracking, or thinking at all creatively about how to populate the space. My friend Adam Lizagore and his Vision company, the Sandwich Vision company that he's spun up to build vision apps, his app Television is the only other real app that comes to mind that's done this, where you can take a real life television, plop it into your room, and then play a video stream onto it, even with that, CRT haze or the curve of the glass or whatever the device is. So I wanted to give that a shout out because it's cool. I don't know. If you've got a Vision Pro, check it out because there's not a lot of other apps to check out. And if you don't have a Vision Pro, I guess wait for a year because there's probably going to be a hardware refresh. Actually, just buy it used. I'm sure a lot of people, these things are just collecting dust. If you have a Vision Pro that's collecting dust and you would like me to try to resell it for you by talking about it on the podcast, right? Podcast@Searls.co. And I won't even take a cut because I don't care. So there you go. Well, with that, let's move on to some recommendations. Just got two today. Two recommendations. One, Shoresy, the spin-off of Letterkenny, that just finished season 3, which was considered part 1 of the series. Well, part 2 is officially kicked off. It looks like all 6 episodes are streaming on Hulu, or we've got the Disney bundle, Disney Plus. And Becky and I watched the first episode, and it is still Shoresy, and it's hilarious, and it's heartwarming, and it's good. So check it out. Content warning, there is some objectification of women and some glorification of alcohol, which, as far as I know, is, part of the culture of Northern Ontario towns. And so who am I to judge? So yeah, if you're a fan of that universe, go check it out. I know it can be difficult to keep track of what shows are available when. I will say this is part of why I canceled Netflix, because they're not in Apple's Up Next thing. And so I don't know when their shows are coming out. Stranger Things is going to come and go, and I probably won't even notice. But Shoresy, season 4 comes back. Hadn't even thought about it in most of a year. It's right there at the top of my Up Next queue, because Apple knows I watch it. So I don't know. Figure it out. The only other recommendation I got is for a video game. The video game is called Avowed. It is, like a lot of games that I play, available, included in your Xbox Game Pass subscription, if you have that. I'm playing on the PC. It's made by Obsidian Entertainment. And Obsidian, if you don't know that studio, the founders worked, I think, at Black Isle, which made the original like Fallout 2 games. Maybe at least Fallout 2, like part of Interplay and all that. The original like role-playing, some Fallout 2 was maybe my favorite role-playing game on a computer that I ever played as a kid. 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. And everyone talks about Bethesda because they actually bought the Fallout property. And of course they have Elder Scrolls, and Skyrim is one of the top-selling games of all time. But like, Bethesda really makes sandbox games, and if you go back in time and look at their earlier Elder Scrolls series, like the thing that was most amazing about Daggerfall was like they made a computer map the size of like Great Britain. It's like hours and hours and hours and hours to go from one side of the continent to the other side, even on a horse inside this game. And they did that with procedural generation of content. They did it with what they call radiant AI, and that didn't exist then, but like, it's basically, it's a system for them to generate quests and activities and sort of like stuff that happens, and then bake that into the game so it becomes like, part of the game, instead of having to manually script absolutely every single thing that happens. That's the kind of game that they make, but when we think of them as role-playing games primarily, even though they're really sandbox games with just enough railing to feel like they're substance and that things matter. And don't get me wrong, like that's its own thing. It's really great. But and a game like Skyrim in particular, or Fallout 3 or 4 or whatever, can make you feel like you're truly exploring in the world and that you have agency, and that when you walk, the sense of immersion can be really strong as a result, in part because it's not hyper designed and carefully crafted. You can lose dozens and dozens of hours. The words emergent gameplay sometimes are thrown about for things that just sort of come to be. But usually when we use that word, it's about like interesting physics systems or coincidences happening. But I think part of the mainstream appeal of the Bethesda games has been things are just on rails enough that you don't have to wait for some 1 in 1,000 chance, or you don't have to think about the physics of like, if I use this power here, then it's going to move that rock there, and then that's going to have this effect here. It's just like, yeah, sometimes you'll just get some bandits and they'll do something funny, right? And you replay the game, and if you do everything in exactly the same way, you'll get the same bandits and they'll still do something funny. It's such a big world, it's unlikely you're going to have exactly that experience again. So they seed the world with a lot of this generation stuff, but it's not truly like a random Minecraft kind of game. Obsidian, who made Fallout 3 New Vegas on contract for Bethesda, and both of whom are owned by Microsoft. And there was like a strong sense of rivalry at one point between the people working in the companies at the time earlier on. They're different. So like they've got Outer Worlds was a great sci-fi game. It's a kind of tightly contained little, your decisions matter in terms of the kind of character you make, and like it's a role-playing game, and that like you have skill checks where you level up in certain you invest your points into certain attributes and skills, and if you have enough points, then you can say certain things in dialogue to unlock additional. Maybe there's a non-violent way to get out of a conflict because you have enough intellect that you can be clever, right, and convince somebody to not shoot you. They had Pillars of Eternity and Pillars of Eternity 2, and I think an expansion pack. And those were more traditional looking, almost BioWare-like, Baldur's Gate-like games, where you were top-down view, third-person, top-down, and you have a party, and it was all point-and-click adventure kind of stuff. Not point-and-click adventure, excuse me. But you know what I mean. A CRPG where you're doing a lot of the classic Dungeons and Dragons-y kind of point-and-click through. Avowed, it blends Outer Worlds, where it's like a first-person 3D role-playing game that's pretty tight, pretty on rails. There's not. You can explore. I mean, you're walking on a road from A to B, and you can go off road, and you'll find things. But it's not going to be like 500 houses, and I went into this one, and I like stole that particular piece of bread, or I moved that particular couch, like you can in a Skyrim or in a Bethesda-made Fallout game. Instead, it's like there's one house on this road, and I know that there's got to be a quest having to do with it because like every house was clearly made on purpose. The flip side is like the artwork is really great because artists actually went through and made all of the art, and they designed the world, and the world has color in it, and the biomes that you move through in the game are intentional, and they're paired with the story beats. And so increasingly, if I'm in VR, right, and I want to just lose 100 hours, something like Skyrim is fantastic because you really feel like you're in another world. And that because it's not totally random, that the world is quote unquote real enough to matter to you. Whereas if it was just randomly generated like No Man's Sky is, you can sort of feel like, yeah, it's just another planet. I don't know. It's just like, it's slop, right? In AI parlance. But when you're in a game like this one, you're not going to lose hundreds of hours because it's probably a 30-hour game, right? And it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it has a certain fixed number of quests. And you're going to do those quests, and you're going to do side quests, and you're going to eventually run out of stuff to do. And you're going to maybe not have that same sense of I'm in another world, but rather I am playing a video game right now. But as people get older, like maybe they have less time to dedicate to games, or maybe like sometimes you just want a video game to be a video game, and you want to see a story, and you want to experience like a typical progression system. I want to learn these skills and unlock these abilities, and then get increasingly stronger, and not have the world level scale around me where it's always kind of moderately difficult but not super hard, right? Like this is a classic RPG with fixed levels where you level up, and you're in a zone that's designed for a higher level, and you will get your ass fucking handed to you over and over and over again until you wise up and go to maybe grind some levels out in some easier place, or just go do a different side quest or something. So Avowed is it's that, but with all of the creature comforts of like a modern game that doesn't want to waste your time. There's no lock picking mini game. You just collect lock picks, and then you can use them, and it unlocks locked boxes. Like pretty straightforward. It's when you die, it doesn't reload you at the last time you remembered to save, or even your latest autosave. Typically it'll snapshot just before combat starts and give you a chance to retry any combat encounter, or just bail out if you couldn't survive it. So like it values your time in a way, and it's there to kind of be fun. Like the Skyrim and the Bethesda games and a lot of like the other kind of fantasy RPGs and open world first person role-playing games. The combat it's not real. The adjective crunchy in terms of you hit a guy and you can feel the crunch. that has been floating around the gaming internet for a few days talking about this game. Because when you play like a traditional, like when you play Skyrim and you hit somebody with a sword, it feels very floaty. It's like, yep. I just have to, I'm going to hit this button. I'm going to watch the sword animation happen. The guy will react somehow. And then, I know that behind the scenes, there's a random number generator that's telling it how many hit points I'm hitting and whatnot. This game feels like the combat is actually combat. Like the skills and all the points and then the equipment that you're upgrading and all that, it does factor into how much damage each of these things do, but it's really a skill-based action game, just with all the dressing of the RPG. And so, like, there's been an RPGification of just about every single genre of video game, like starting with like Call of Duty, adding progression to its multiplayer, and you know, basically every third-person action game having some sort of progression path to give players a sense that they're getting stronger and better as the game goes on, rather than just have it be truly skill-based. And this has been something going on for 15 years. But I think this is maybe the first time where a traditional-ass role-playing game has gone the other direction and pulled some of the innovations in action games into it. And so the parry system is like pretty advanced. It's why I suck at it, and I'm choosing just to be an archer, just sniping people with arrows. That's how I know it's a real ass action game. It's like I'm real fucking bad at close quarters combat, just like in real life. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. I guess I'm, rather than just giving a straight up review, it's if any of that sounds good, you should try it out. I'm a huge sucker for skill checks in dialogue. I love having dialogue options that are only available if I have hit a level where I was able to, like, you know, invest points in a certain thing, so that I could like say the smart ass thing, right? Or say the clever thing, or have enough like perception to say the insightful thing. And if you don't have that many points on the skill, you can't even see what you would have been able to say. It's not just grayed out, but it's like, oh, there was a thing I could have said, but I guess I can't say that. Additionally, those dialogue trees are much less like you can ask the 15 questions and go through them one at a time. And very often it's like, you could just say one response to this, and then the person is going to react. And then that was your chance to talk to that person. So the consequences of the narrative experience seem like a little bit stickier. Like your decisions matter is kind of a trope, but like your decisions actually do like define your experience, at least within a given gameplay session. Check it out. You're either still listening to this, in which case you should play it, or you're not, in which case we should probably just move on to the mailbag.
You've got mail.
All right, we'll just pick a couple of these and then call it a day. David writes in, he says, since you're listening to a lot of podcasts and you sound like a smart person who would take notes of whatever useful info they encounter, do you have a smart and easy way to, quote unquote, bookmark a timestamp in a podcast so that you can get back to it later? I'm using Apple Podcast. It sounds like you are too. I am. And so far, what I found was to open the episode's transcripts on my phone, long press the piece of text I'm interested in to bookmark it, and then use share, and then to bookmark it, hit share from. And when you hit the share sheet, it shares a link that's timestamp encoded, but it doesn't necessarily look like it. He goes on. I wish there was a way to request Siri to bookmark this podcast at this timestamp. Good fucking luck, David. But I've yet to find it. If you know better, please help. All right. So I run everything through Apple Reminders. I don't use the Apple Reminders app, but I use it as my ingestion point for things, because Dingus is very good at capturing reminders generally. As long as you don't end a phrase with the word in or at, you say in, it'll look for a reminders list of that name and say, I don't know about that list. And do you want me to put this on this list here? Do you want me to create that list? And then you say no, and it's like, okay, never mind. And then it just throws away whatever you told it. So you got to be careful of that. And if you say at, and then like anything that it could perceive as a time or a place, then it'll make it like a location-based or a time-based reminder, which you may not want. Other than that, obvious stuff that's been wrong for a decade. What I will do is if I'm listening to a podcast, I'm usually on a run. That's when I listen to them the most. I'll look at the timestamp or how many minutes are left in the podcast. Even if it's a three hour long podcast, I'll just remind myself, hey, at timestamp whatever, or with 37 minutes left to go in this podcast, or at whatever, remind me, yada yada yada, and I'll tell it that. Works for me better than bookmarks. Typically, I don't need to refer back to the podcast, so I don't really care to have a link back to it. I just need to remember, like, oh yeah, there's this movie I wanted to watch, or this other thing, you know. Hell, I guess now that I think about it, I don't even usually need the timestamp. I just talk at it, and I'm just like, okay, remind me to do this, remind me to do that. And so listening to a 2 hour long podcast, I'll typically walk away with 4 or 5 to-do items, if it's a good one, right? Especially the Apple ones where it's like, hey, there's an app that I hadn't heard of, I'll go check it out, right? That's my best advice. I guess your next step, David, might be to ask, like, what is the purpose of these bookmarks? And it sounds like it's probably mostly follow up for yourself to go check something out later when you're at a computer. At which point, just setting a reminder and not really worrying about rereading the transcript might be best. Although if there's stuff in the transcript that you want to go back and like see again or hear again, that would be interesting. But that's just, once I've heard something once, I'm usually over it, unless it's the sound of my own voice. Owana writes in, congrats on the Tesla, even though it's tied to the odious. We're living in Norway since 10 years, and we're driving a Tesla or the other for the last 9 years. We had the S, the X, and now a 3 and an X. In the last 2 to 3 years, we also had the shame of being a customer of the guy. But with the cars, we are quite happy. We considered an electric Jaguar and an electric Porsche, but in both, the dashboards were too busy. We considered the Y, but we're 5 people here and an occasional grandma visiting. We wanted to have a 7-seater. Yeah, I'd mentioned that like seemingly everyone in Norway has a Tesla. It's just ironic that they're wealthy because they produce oil, so they all drive the electric vehicles. Thank you for writing in. It's interesting to imagine having multiple. I guess if you need multiple cars and you got multiple people commuting and you're in that ecosystem. Right now, I'm still just like a little baby duck at the phrase. I am just like a baby because I am still just dipping my toe in the water of this whole like range anxiety disorder, right? Where I'm like, well, I've got plenty of range, especially for how I use the car almost every day of the year, but like I'm going on a second cruise. I'm going on a bro cruise with my bro on Friday. And it's about an hour drive there, hour drive back. And right now I'm limiting my charging to 50% to kind of condition the battery or keep it, in optimal peak performance. And I just set a reminder actually with Dingus a minute ago, to say, hey, remind myself to charge the car to a higher limit on Thursday before I go, because if it's only at like 50% when I get there and it's like 35 and then I don't know if it sits for 3 days and it's not plugged in, will it feel tight getting back? And the answer is probably no. It'll probably be fine ultimately. But that's where I'm at with just the one car. And so I guess what I'm saying is the idea of having 2 cars that are both, not only both electric, but both this particular platform would scare me a little bit, because sometimes it's just the case. It's like, what if FSD just turns off, right? Like, what if there's a software bug on the other side? It's like AI lemon laws probably don't apply, right? Like if your car just becomes completely debilitated because the software fails, having 2 of the same type of car means you can't leave your house. Similarly, like if they're both electric, I don't know, like it just, having one that burns traditional dinosaur bones, just like was good enough for my dad, makes me feel a little bit safe right now. And I know that's not totally rational, but maybe a few years from now I'll feel better about like, okay, we can just be a 2 electric car house. And at that point, maybe it's like, all right, and we're going to get the solar panel roof and we're going to just, be completely cut off from our old, oil sucking past. But I'm also just like not that motivated just yet. Although that said, it was only an hour and a half ago or whatever that I was complaining about how hard it is to drive my traditional car. And it doesn't seem like any of the other automakers are catching up from a self-driving perspective nearly as quickly. If, in fact, between GM shutting down Cruise, pulling out of Cruise, and then Cruise shutting down the startup that they've invested in, and Waymo collaborations with different automakers kind of still being hobbled by how expensive LiDAR installations are. And of course, Apple pulling out. There's just like not a lot of other goats in that rodeo, or you could even imagine somebody having as sophisticated of a full self-driving probably in at least 5 years, as what Tesla has today. And that's not good. And more companies should be investing in this. But I don't know. Thanks for writing in. Appreciate it. I'm choosing to call it there because my throat's getting a little tickle, and that normally means that I don't want to be here anymore. Goodbye.